Hey everyone! I'm Albert Boris. So, Mario Kart World has been out for around a week now, and to say that I've been enjoying my time with it would be a huge lie. In fact, it would even be dishonest for me to say I like the game. No, I've been loving it, almost every second of it in fact. Never did I imagine that I could have this much fun with a Mario Kart game. Like, I'm honestly kind of shocked by how much better this is than every other entry in the series. And while I did expect it to be my favorite one, I didn't think it could be one of the best Mario games I've ever played. And it seems a lot of people are feeling the same way. As a result, I suspect fans are long gonna debate which courses are the best in the game, and so today I wanted to chime in on that discussion and rank every single track from worst to best in Mario Kart World, based on their layouts, gimmicks, and to a lesser extent, atmosphere too. Going in, it seems that a lot of people were concerned about the track selection here, since there's only 30 as opposed to 96 and 8 deluxe, but now that we actually have the game, I think it's safe to say that they focused more on quality than quantity. Because oh my, are these some of the most technical and challenging tracks the series has to offer. However, I might have to set up some rules first, because what constitutes as an eligible race course for the ranking? After all, some tracks have multiple variants that are only seen in specific cups, and other courses have dynamic elements that are minimized in Grand Prix, due to you only doing one lap on them there. So in the end, I decided that I'm only gonna rank these courses based off how they are in versus mode, just because they usually offer the most balanced experience. So for Crown City, I'll combine the first 3 variants, for Shy Guy Bazaar, I'll just rank the main variant, although I'll still give my thoughts on the second route, and for Peach Stadium, actually, okay, I need to rant about that first variant anyway, so exception there. But yeah, with all that being said, I say, let's get started now. Wait, did Yoshi just mute toward the camera? Can you believe it, guys? Well, neither can I. There is actually a course that is so bad that I had to invent a whole new tier just for this list, because frankly, F tier doesn't describe its awfulness enough. Admittedly, going into the game, there were a handful of courses I presumed could take the bottom spot for me. I wasn't excited to see Moo Moo Meadows again for the 3rd time, nor was I happy to see Mario Circuit 3 become the most recurring track in the series. But my god, do they have nothing on the absolute atrocity that is Peach Stadium in the Shell Cup. What the f happened here? So, you know how much I hate SNES Bowser Castle 2 or Vanilla Lake 1? Well, at least they're tracks. For as unplayable as they are, at least they tried doing something. This is just a rectangle that takes around 30 seconds to beat. I don't even know what to say. The only redeeming part of it is that I guess it has some cars to avoid, but I mean, how do you even salvage this? It's honestly the worst Mario Kart course that I've ever played, and it seems like even Nintendo is aware of this, because in Versus mode, it doesn't even exist. You just play the Special Cup variant. But wait, you might think, maybe this track still works in the context of the Shell Cup. It doesn't. If anything, it just feels like a prologue to the actual Peach Stadium track, which actually it could have worked as, since it's literally just a left turn away after the finish line. But no, I guess we just couldn't have had it for some arbitrary reason. And it's even worse because this is the finale to the Shell Cup, and in this game, it's not the beginner Retro Cup, it's the midway point of the entire selection. Imagine how epic the actual Peach Stadium track would have been as the ender, taking everything you've learned up until that point. But whatever. You get the gist now. The fact that this is considered a course makes me so baffled that I have to put it in G tier. Do us all a favor, Nintendo, and fix the Shell Cup in a future update. Anyways, when it comes to the worst actual racetrack, the answer wasn't really much of a surprise here either. Koopa Troopa Beach is one of the most boring and wasted ideas I've seen for a retro track ever. At first, when I heard the name of it, I thought it was gonna be an updated remake of the N64 track, which got me really excited at first, since I really enjoyed that course. Except for some reason, this is the name of the SNES version now. I mean, okay, sure. But you know what, fine. At least it's gonna be a combined version of the 2 tracks, right? After all, there's no number in the title, and you can even see both of them on the map. So common sense, right? No. No, for some reason, it's just the second version, and it's just as underwhelming as you'd think it would be. The reason this track was good in Super Mario Kart was that despite just being a circle, it had a fun section where you needed to avoid the deep water, which made for a shockingly engaging track by that game standards. So why is it in a game where you can just drive over water? I'm not saying Koopa Beach 1 would have been much better, but since it didn't have a section like that, why wasn't that the track chosen as a course instead? Especially since that one hasn't even been remade before. But wait, you might say, you do 5 laps on this course instead of 3, just like in Super Mario Kart. Isn't that super cool? No, it's not. It just means I have to waste even more time on this boring and empty circle, only occasionally avoiding cheap jeeps. I don't care that the 5 laps are for legacy purposes. Sure, on the surface it's a kinda cool reference, but I feel like Mario Circuit in the same game already does a way better job at celebrating the SNES legacy. This one by comparison is just awful in the present day. At least the remix is kinda rave, but music is not nearly enough to save a track. And it's clearly only as chaotic as it is to hide how bland the rest of the course is. Somehow, that is not the most disappointing track, however. Say what you want about Koopa Beach, in the end, it's still an SNES track that would have sucked either way. What should not have been so bad though, right next on the list is Starview Peak. Don't let the name fool you, this is anything but peak. How do you possibly make a Mario Galaxy track that feels even more wasted than Rosalina's Ice World? Oh, I know, by combining it with the worst elements of Ice Ice Outpost and Singapore Speedway. At first, I thought I was maybe overreacting for putting this track so low, but honestly, I don't think I am. It's just a bunch of smooth and empty turns. The first half is just boring, with these parallel roads that have nothing going on them. There is one small drop, and one of the roads barely goes a little higher at some point, but otherwise it's basically just completely empty, and the rail grinding is completely detrimental, since it's usually on the outer road. And then the second half just feels like a glorified straightaway, with some dash rings and one measly ramp. It's like they took that rooftop section in Singapore Speedway, except extended it way beyond its welcome. It's such a nothing course with almost no substance at all. Is there anything good about this track? Well, I guess the visuals are kinda nice, at least during nighttime. I mean, the water section certainly looks impressive, and the music is a bit enchanting, but none of it is memorable enough to leave much of an impression. On the whole, it's definitely more engaging than Koopa Beach, but at the same time, let's not pretend like that's an achievement. Even if we just had some chill bullies on the road, like we do in the intermission fruit and the Spiny Rally, that alone would have made this track slightly more interesting, but as of now, it's just a wasted and uninteresting track that doesn't even make engaging use of the mechanics in the game. Starview Mid is more like it, and that's the nicest name I came up for it. Fortunately, those are the only 2 to 3 courses that I find to be genuinely bad here. And because there are no mediocre tracks, we're gonna immediately jump over to the C tier, which is for the courses that aren't exactly good, but they're enjoyable enough and nowhere near bad. Starting at number 28 with Boo Cinema. And here we have yet another example of a quality term being appropriated by a course name. Boo Cinema is not absolute cinema. It's boo! Okay, jokes aside, it's not that bad. To be honest, while it shares many of the same problems as Starview Peak does, in that the layout and design does not live up to the potential, it's nowhere near as disappointing. Already, the idea of driving through a movie theater and on film rolls is a really unique concept for a racetrack, and the presentation does a fairly decent job at leaving an impression on you. The music is both dramatic, but also a bit whimsical, like you just stumble upon a bunch of boos trying to watch some movies. And I love how the screen actually counts down as you approach the movie section. And speaking of, oh my does that area look cool. The reason this track is at the bottom of the C tier though is that the layout isn't really anything that interesting. The cinema part itself doesn't really have many turns at all, and while the movie section itself is really fun to twist around on, I wish it was a little more than that. Plus the rail grinding isn't as in-depth as in most other courses. It's still a fine track overall, but definitely one of the least engaging ones on the list. Well, congratulations Mario Circuit, you narrowly avoided the bottom 3 on the ranking. To be honest, this is probably the most inoffensive track in the whole game, which kinda works in its favor. Admittedly, I wasn't really too excited at all about this track initially, since from the looks of it, it just seemed to be the same old SNES Mario Circuit tracks that we know and are tired of. But actually, it's kind of enjoyable. The fact that they combined the first 3 Mario Circuit tracks into one makes it noticeably more interesting than it ever was before, since it allows for more variety each of the 3 laps. By themselves, they would have all been boring, but together, it's a nice tribute to the roots of Mario Kart. You start off with Mario Circuit 1, which is a short warm-up, then go to 2 with its big jump, and then end off with 3, which is the hardest one. Oh yeah, and there's also half-pipes surrounding each variant, which I definitely didn't expect, but hey, it's another element that makes it more engaging. Although, personally, if it were up to me, I'd replace Mario Circuit 2 with Remix Mario Circuit and Mario Circuit 3 with 4, since they do the same jobs but with way more interesting layouts. Beyond that though, not much else to say. It's a course that exists, and I don't hate it, even if it's weird to not have a Nitro Mario Circuit in the game because of it. Speaking of however, right after, we have the game's opener track, Mario Bros. Circuit at number 26. This is the course I probably have the least to say about. It's a decent enough starter course that introduces most of the game's new mechanics in a way that's engaging. There's plenty of rail grinding sections, a short wall you can jump onto, as well as a split path near the end, where you can opt for a glider. All of it is certainly more than what Mario Circuit does, and moreover, I also find the theme choice for this track to be very interesting. When I saw this track for the first time in the trailer, I thought it reminded me of Radiator Springs in the Cars movies, but looking at it more deeply, I think the reason they put this track in a Mesa desert was as a reference to the Super Mario Bros. Super Show, whose intro also takes place in one, and hence that's also why it's the Mario Bros. Circuit. This is nothing that affects the ranking, I just thought it was a nice bit of trivia. Okay, for the last C-tier course, I can already smell how controversial this choice will be, but rounding out the OK tracks, we have Airship Fortress. I wanted to love this course, but I can't. I understand that people have been clamoring for this track's return a long time, especially after it was supposedly snubbed from the Booster Course Pass, but playing it here, I'm not sure how to feel about this remake. I like that the sky is finally purple again, even if it's only at sunrise, and the fact that the track actually has a shortcut now is pretty nice, but why can't I cheese half the track without barely doing anything? So usually most of the courses in this game have a few rail grinding sections, which can be tricky to reach but incredibly rewarding once you do get to them, as they give you free speed boosts, in addition to guiding you automatically through a section. The reason it doesn't work on this track though is because you can literally just hop on a rail right after the starting line, and it's free real estate. Even jumping to the second rail to cut time takes little effort because you just do it right when the track curves. Personally, I already thought Airship Fortress was a bit overrated from the start, since while I love the foreboding and dangerous theme of it, most of the sections are short and only barely scratch the surface of what they could be. And now that you can even just breeze past most of it, it makes it even more underwhelming and easy. Why? Is it to justify its place in the Flower Cup? Yeah, I don't know. Oh yeah, and the remix sounds like a tragic circus now. Or well, okay, on the whole it's fine, but that specific section, yeah, it almost makes me uncontrollably laugh. The track itself is still decent, and as much as it cheapens the course out, rail grinding is still inherently satisfying, but even after all this time, DS Mario Circuit in the Booster Pass still has the better remake. Maybe it wasn't so bad we got that after all. Anyways, with that though, that's all of the simply just okay courses out of the way. From this point on, we move on to the B tier, which is for the courses that are actually really good, and I don't mind at all playing on. Starting with the slightly better DS retro this game, DK Pass. This one is just relaxing and inoffensive. I thought the original one was already pretty cool, having you drive through a soothing mountain pass, and this one largely stays the same, trying to just enhance it with world's new mechanics. Albeit with a fun twist, because in this version it's also been partly turned into a ski resort, a bit similar to DK Snowboard Cross, and while on one hand it makes me wonder why they didn't just bring that track back, I feel like this new spin on DK Pass makes it a bit more unique than just another mountain course, so I don't mind. Overall, pretty cool track, even if some of the rail grinding is detrimental, and I wish the snowmen weren't removed. Also, why did they make this out of bounds area look like a shortcut? Ah, whatever. So, one of the coolest Mario Kart 7 niters in my opinion has got to be Wario's Galleon. It's not a course I often see people talking about, but I always thought it was one of the coolest and most unique ideas ever for a stage, having you drive through a half-submerged battleship. So, why did they bring it back to a game that doesn't have underwater driving? I mean, it certainly still works, they just lowered the water level, but it does kinda hurt the track, because not only were some areas removed as a result, but I'm not the biggest fan of how driving on the water works in this game. It's more slippery than usual, and while it's usually satisfying to trick off of waves in the water, the game is kinda picky about what it considers to be a wave, no matter how small it is. So sometimes when I think I'll trick, I just end up hopping, and it just feels really awkward to me. It's not that I dislike the water, I just don't like it either. However, the reason I still think this is a pretty good course is that it's also one of the more technical tracks, with lots of hidden areas and split paths to find, if you're good with wall jumping, which makes it engaging in other ways. Even if this specific rail is kind of finicky to get up on. But yeah, overall it's good enough. And from one Wario track we immediately go to the other, this time with Wario Stadium, the final N64 track to ever be remade for the first time. And they took out half the layout. But actually, unlike when it happened to Sky Garden, this time it's marginally more acceptable and understandable, since the original track was a little too long, and considering you only do one lap in Grand Prix, it was probably the smartest option. Even if I kinda wish Versus Mode maybe had a full layout still, and was just shortened to 2 laps, but in either case, it still has its core intact, being a gauntlet of different ramps and bumps to trick off from. It's got what it needs to have, including an even more epic big jump now. The only real loss, I'd say, was Wario's face not being plastered across the walls anymore, but I suppose I can live without it. And at the same time, being able to not only jump onto them, but also grind on top of the walls is a super satisfying trade-off. It's still only in B tier though, because admittedly, the layout also gets a bit repetitive and samey at times, but hey, it's still a pretty massive glow up. Now, Acorn Heights is a course which I'm surprised I didn't put near the top of my list. When I first saw gameplay for it back in April, I thought it seemed like one of the most ambitious tracks in the game, with all the split roads and elements it had. But playing it now, I may have overrated it. It's certainly still really good. Right off the bat, it starts off pretty insanely with a glider down from a treetop. And the following section right after is incredibly engaging, with lots of beanstalks to climb up and the platforms to jump up onto. Where the track does kinda lose me though is the final section. Having 4 different roads to pick from sounds cool on the surface, but they all play the same and are kinda boring and straightforward. And while an acorn will roll down onto one of them, it's very easily avoidable. Plus the left roads are slower than the right ones. So yeah, while it is a really good track overall, it could definitely be better, and while I love forest themes, that's usually when they're realistic. This one's aesthetic feels too much like I'm in a fairy tale, which I'm not too big of a fan of. Next, Faraway Oasis is probably the Mario Kart World track of all time. Remember when we saw it in the trailer and thought we'd be racing alongside zebras and other animals? Yeah, that was just the intermission leading up to it. But this track still does deliver. And while it offers a pretty average experience by this game's standards, keep in mind that the standards are really high. It feels almost like a way more engaging version of Riverside Park, except with way more verticality, split roads, and a savanna aesthetic. Overall, it's just a really exciting river safari that makes fun use of Mario Kart World's gameplay, and so it deserves its own share of love too. As does DK Spaceport at number 19. This was definitely one of the tracks that most caught my attention upon its reveal, being based off of the original arcade Donkey Kong game. And playing it in person, it works surprisingly well. It's the first of the game's many sectional tracks on the list, and the way it works is that each rising level is kind of its own lap, slowly rising in difficulty. First, you're just trying to avoid the barrels rolling toward you. Next, you're avoiding barrels that go sideways. And after that, you're trying to stay up on top, before jumping between walls, and finally, you must get past the Robo DK himself. The whole journey almost feels like a boss battle, giving it a depth unlike any other track. But at the same time, it's also a bit generic at the same time. All of the sections by themselves are fairly straightforward and basic, and while they work decently well together, I still think it bears mentioning that gameplay-wise, it's nothing that special when compared to the multitude of other courses in the game, even if it's still good. At number 18, Bowser's Castle is probably the track that left me the most conflicted on how I should feel upon playing it the first time, because it's both overwhelming but also kind of underwhelming at the same time. On one hand, it's insanely chaotic, with tons of sharp turns everywhere, as well as an intense thunderstorm ravaging the track. And I love how fast it feels to drive on it, forcing you to be really careful and agile. But at the same time, the layout isn't that interesting. It feels more like just a visual spectacle, without anything really happening on the road. I mean, heck, the big Bowser statue doesn't even do anything, it just looms over the castle. And I find the lack of thwomps to be very disturbing. However, just like with Faraway Oasis, it's nowhere near close to a bad layout. And it certainly does the job, hence why it shall close off the B tier for me. And with that, we're already all of the way to the A tier, and we're not even halfway done with the ranking. If this doesn't go to show how amazing this track selection is, I don't know what does. And I already thought the B tier courses were pretty technical.
Wait, is that Moo Moo Meadows I'm hearing? You can't actually be serious to put that in.
Dude, you spoiled it, Bertrell! But yeah, as insane as this might sound, but opening up the A tier, I'm actually gonna put Moo Moo Meadows at number 17. And I'm as shocked as all of you are. I did not look forward to seeing this track again, since we just had it in 8 Deluxe, but honestly, I almost actually cried upon playing it here for the first time. It is so beautiful. Playing it in Grand Prix, the dawning sunrise gave it an almost nostalgic touch, and the remix is somehow even more joyous and emotional than it was in 8 Deluxe. And actually, the layout isn't as uninteresting as I thought it would be. It's still Moo Moo Meadows, so pretty basic, but the road actually feels a bit more narrow at times, making the cows a bigger hazard. And the general terrain feels hillier too, allowing you to pull off more tricks. And heck, there's even a new shortcut on the opposite side of the glider, allowing for more opportunities. Really, I don't have any issues at all with this track. It's just a pleasant ride overall, and if it was more ambitious, it could potentially be even higher. And this isn't even the biggest guilty pleasure on the list. There's another one coming up ahead soon. But before that, at number 16, we have Peach Stadium. This time the actual thing. And oh my, does it give the name of Peach Stadium so much more justice than this bullcrap. This is another track that I wasn't too excited for initially, due to the aesthetic just looking like a generic mix between Mario Kart Stadium and Royal Raceway. And yeah, playing it now, it still doesn't look too unique. But where it does shine is the presentation and layouts. Basically, imagine if Mario Kart Stadium, instead of being a tutorial track, was the second to last course of the Special Cup. That's pretty much what this is, being an ultimate test of skills that takes everything you've learned for a final challenge before Rainbow Road. The turns are real and narrow, the soundtrack is incredibly celebratory, and there is a whole ton of split roadways along the way too. I love how challenging it all is, and it really makes you feel good for coming such a long way. In fact, I almost feel bad for not putting it any higher, but hey, the standards are getting high now. And other tracks are simply just more interesting visually, while also being technical. Okay. This is the guilty pleasure I was talking about. Opening up the top 15 is Desert Hills. This was the first course I ended up playing in this game, due to not wanting to be basic and doing the Mushroom Cup first, and oh man did it solidify my entire opinion on the game going forward. At first, it seems like it might be worse than the original. All of the Super Mario Bros. 3 references are gone, and a lot of the insane shortcuts seem to have been nerfed. But you know what's better than Super Mario Bros. 3? Super Mario Land. Or well, at least to me. It's true that it's an arcade game, but oh my did I love how its level themes and enemies were completely different from other Mario adventures. Especially Toko Toko and Batidon, the Easter Island heads. And the reason I'm bringing them up is because after 39 years, they finally make a reappearance in this track. Batidons jump around the big open area now, which by the way has crazy fun sand dunes to trick off of now, and as the race goes on, more and more Toko Tokos start running around the starting area. Not only is it a dynamic change that makes the race interesting, but I just f***ing love how goofy they look when running around like Forrest Gump. They're so adorable and so funny that I don't even have the words to describe how hyperfixated I am with them. Oh yeah, and there's also a new glider shortcut at the end. But yeah, I f***ing love Desert Hills now, and I can't believe I ever said that. Like Moo Moo Meadows, it's just another simple and pleasant track without any deep-seated issues. And that's all there really is to say about it. Next, at number 14, we have Whistle Stop Summit. This is one of the tracks that most benefits from the gameplay mechanics introduced in Mario Kart World. Basically, imagine if Mare Mountain and Calamar Desert had a baby. That's kind of what this course is, having a race around the mountain with a train track going along with it. Oh, and you can grind on those tracks and alternate between so many lanes. It is actually unbelievable how satisfying it is. And the fact that you also have to be careful and avoid the train adds an element of risk versus reward too. On the whole, it's one of the tracks I'm most shocked by how engaging it is. Seriously, if this same course was in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, it would be infinitely more boring with how much more shallow its gameplay is. Alright, so do you guys want to hear a secret? Or well, okay, it's not really a secret, but here goes. I love the city tracks in the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass. I know they're pretty hated for notoriously changing up each lap, but I personally always loved that detail, since it allowed for each lap to stay fresh and distinct, while still being set in a smaller area. And oh my, would you look at that! We have one of those here too, in the form of Crown City at number 13, and it might just be one of the best tracks of this archetype. Either this or Madrid Drive. Admittedly, if you play this track in Grand Prix, it's nothing that special. Both the Mushroom and Shell Cups contain this track, but because of how you only do one lap, they sadly only get to show off one variant each. And while they're still very good on their own, the real masterpiece is in Versus mode, which combines 3 separate layouts into one journey. The first lap taken from the Shell Cup is already pretty cool, kicking off with a split path, tight alleyways, and then a stairway followed by a half pipe. Then the second lap from the Mushroom Cup has you driving up the city onto a construction field hovering above, before epically gliding across the cityscape. And then the final lap, which goes unused in Grand Prix, has you drifting along the soothing coastal streets. And on the whole, all of this is just a really beautiful combination. And actually, there's even a 4th variant that's not even used in Versus mode, where you get to go to the beach. Honestly, I just love how much depth this one track has. It really feels like an actual city you could live in, as much as it's also an organic racetrack. With that said, however, musically, nothing compares to the absolute banger that is Cheep Cheep Falls at number 12. Holy crap, this has got to be the course of my favorite music tune in the game. I never would have expected Japanese flutes and electric guitars to blend together so well, but they did, and it makes for a surprisingly catchy and epic theme. And the track itself is pretty kick-ass too. The Japanese autumn aesthetic is a hugely pleasant delight, and the layout is incredibly thrilling, taking you up a mountain and then plunging down a waterfall, tricking off rocks and cliffs. It's so unbelievably energetic, and unlike in Wario's Galleon, where the water level is usually flat and unchanging, you're constantly bouncing around here, going from waterfall to waterfall, allowing you to trick off of the waves much more easily. I guess if I had to come up with some complaints though, it's that the camera angle does get a bit wonky when you're in the falls. Not so much that it makes it unplayable, but enough that it becomes somewhat awkward to turn at times, especially with how sharp the corners are. However, it's a minor complaint, and in the end, this track still secures a spot in the A tier. I love it. And we're only gonna continue to get better. At number 11, we have the definitive version of Sky High Sunday, the only course technically returning from 8 Deluxe. Personally, while I never hated the Booster Course Pass version, it was definitely a track that left me underwhelmed, due to how simplistic and seemingly rushed out the track felt. And after playing this track in World, I immediately understood why it was. This was never supposed to be an 8 Deluxe, it was always intended to be a new course for this game. Remember those rails that you could just clip right through? Well, in this game, they actually make sense to exist because of rail grinding. It makes such a massive difference, and in fact the entire track is pretty much centered around them, putting them on every split path there is. It's so much more engaging than I ever thought it could be. And in fact, looking at it more deeply, I'm pretty sure they only rushed out a version of it for the Booster Course Pass is because they realized Pipeline wasn't gonna work with its physics. But they still wanted a new track each wave, and this was what we got instead. I mean, you can even wall jump off of the final turn now, what else do I need to add? The only reason this track is not an S tier is because the layout is an oval, and while it's still amazing in spite of that, it still makes it somewhat straightforward. Although honestly, I feel bad for even coming up with a problem. It's great and I'll leave it at that. Man, we've only just entered the top 10 and we've already reached the best of the best. The courses which have so little flaws they might as well be almost perfect. And opening up the home stretch, we have Salty Salty Speedway, which takes you through the lovely streets and canals of a Venice-inspired town. It's gorgeous, it's relaxing, what's there not to love about it from the get-go? And oh my is it technical. Remember that clip from the trailer where Birdo was pulling that insane wall grind combo? Well, it's just as fun to do it in the game. And there's even more technicality than that in this track. The reason this track is only at the bottom of the S tier though is that, well, outside of that, it's a little more basic than the other tracks in here. You mostly just cruise along this canal, and as I've said in the past, water physics aren't exactly for me, but that obviously doesn't make it a bad track. It's just that when other tracks have even more theme variety, while also being just as technical, it simply had to take a lower spot. And even despite my feelings for water, it still obviously serves an important purpose in this track, so I don't really think it's an issue. Next, Chaco Mountain gets my favorite number 9 spot. Never in a million years would I have imagined that we'd already get this course back so soon, since we already had it in the Booster Course Pass. But actually, the changes made to it make it more than worth it. Unlike previous iterations, this time it's been industrialized by a gang of charging chucks, attempting to extract the chocolate from it. And honestly, it actually feels kind of badass to drive on. The Hard Rock remix gives it a much more epic atmosphere, and there are so many charging chucks everywhere, running back and forth and tossing hand eggs. The fact that their animations and behavior is directly inspired by their Super Mario World appearances is such a cool reference, and on the whole, it's just beautiful to see how far this course has come since the N64 days. And to think that it's become one of the most remade tracks in the series now, it's honestly kind of deserving with how much it's improved every time. Alright, so at number 8, this one might be controversial, depending on how people in general feel about it so far, but truth be told, if there's one track I'm not quite sure on what merits to rank it on, it would have to be this game's new Rainbow Road. Because on one hand, it has got to be one of the most cinematic and beautiful Mario Kart courses ever made. I don't think there's ever been a track that filled me with as many emotions as this one did. Because for starters, it's a 5-minute long section track and each of the 4 laps are filled with pure joy, challenge and cinema. Or well, okay, it's not that hard, but whatever. It almost feels like a celebration of the whole Mario Kart series, taking on bits from each of the previous Rainbow Roads but blending it together for a final hurrah. The first lap is really wavy with lots of tight turns and split roads. The second lap has you drifting along a crystallized landscape before taking on more split roads. The third lap has you visiting a space station, and unlike the one in 8, it actually feels fully realized in its potential and even plays like a Super Mario Galaxy stage. And then finally, for the last lap, you glide back down to Earth, while a train containing some of the new game's NPCs zooms past you. All of it is enough to make a grown man cry, and the amount of passion put into it is unmatched. But let's also not get too biased. As much as I love it, it's also for being a visual spectacle. Gameplay-wise, it's definitely not bad, not at all, but is it also anything that special? It's neither particularly challenging, nor does it really make use of the new mechanics introduced in this game. Peach Stadium, by comparison, felt like a far bigger celebration of your skills. And while I understand that this is more so just supposed to be a reward, hence why it's more straightforward, it does lead me to believe that it's a little unfair to put it any higher than this. It's beautiful, but deep down it's also just a way better take on what N64 Rainbow Road tried to do. Oh yeah, and plus it's 5 minutes long, meaning it will probably get a bit boring in the future, but still, judging it as it is, it's still an epic journey. Now, Dandelion Depths at number 7 though, is probably the course that I feel the most hyper-fixated on. Either this one or Desert Hills. When I first saw screenshots of this track, I was like, hold up, is this Steam Gardens? No joke, aesthetically it felt like it was taken right out of the wooded kingdom of Super Mario Odyssey. And as a huge fan of not only that game, but especially that kingdom, it filled me up with so much joy. Back in my video where I predicted the tracks for this game, I talked about how literally anything was possible for this course, as back in April we had nothing to go by except its icon, and to see that Nintendo surprised me in the best way possible makes me so happy. That said, gameplay wise though, Dandelion Depths doesn't seem that intriguing at first. At a quick glance, it seems like a pretty mediocre track with just some smooth turns, an open area, and then a hill right back up to the finish line. But I assure you, it's way more than that, because it's also the perfect showcase of how technical tracks can be in this game. Right off the bat, the starting area practically begs you to get up on the walls, to show you that there will be plenty of secret pathways in this course. And then it gets even more insane once you get to the Dandelion Cave, where you have pools of water descending down like a staircase. It's already satisfying how you can use the big drops to trick off of the waves, but then you can also use them to jump toward the wall to reach some insanely far away platforms. It's super hard to pull off, but super rewarding once you do. Although honestly, even just going down normally is decently fun too. Overall though, I wouldn't be surprised if this track grows even more on me in the future. It's just that I also think that it's still a bit too simple to be higher. At number 6, we have Dino Dino Jungle. This is probably the track that was most hurt by only being one lap in Grand Prix. Because playing it in versus mode with 3 laps, it's arguably the most dynamic of the non-section courses. Already, it's probably one of the most impressive retro tracks from the get-go, transforming this prehistoric jungle into a Jurassic Park-styled research lab. And honestly, it works shockingly well. It manages to keep the core intact, while still adding a new spin to it with plenty of new sections. Oh yeah, and remember when the original track only had one measly Noshi dinosaur? Well, now there's several of them, and each lap they move around. First lap, you just have a couple of Triceratops around you, that you can drive up for a speed boost. Second lap, a Noshi walks around the jungle, and a T-Rex breaks out of the lab. And then for the final lap, he's wreaking havoc all over the place. It's a super engaging element that's unfortunately missed out on in Grand Prix, where instead they just sorta blend together everything at once. And while it still works, it definitely doesn't feel as special as here. To be honest, the only reason this track is not in the top 5 is because the middle bridge, which was really tough to stay on originally, has now just been turned into a cheesable rail grind section. Although it's pretty trivial. Opening up the top 5, we have a retro track that's been somehow even more dramatically changed though, Peach Beach. How the hell did it take such an average course and make it one of the most interesting tracks in the game? By giving it a Tor arrow gimmick, of course. Admittedly, the first lap does kinda suck. The whole charm of the course initially was that you had to be careful with the rising tides, so that you wouldn't be slowed down. But now that you can just drive over the water, it becomes nothing more than a glorified oval. If this course was just this variant, it would be sitting down close to D tier. But then lap 2 suddenly has you driving into town, going up and tricking off stairways and rooftops, completely changing the gameplay. Now the course is a perfect use of the technical mechanics of the game, and lap 3 only gets more hectic as you glide through a narrow alleyway with numerous opportunities to jump between walls. It's such a wonderful progression, which ultimately makes for one of the most shockingly engaging tracks in the game. Although the fact that the course is still in S tier might seem a bit unfair, considering how much I just slammed the first lap. But if you just see it as a small piece of the puzzle, it becomes much less offensive when it's just a warm-up for the true show. And considering how much I love when tracks change up each lap, I have no qualms about putting it so high. Honestly, after seeing Calamari Desert, Peach Gardens, and now this track, I wish more courses would change up mid-race like this, as it just makes them more interesting on the whole. And it's no different here. However, at number 4, now we're getting to the truly flawless tracks of the game, starting with the cult classic Toad's Factory. At long last, the most requested retro track to return has finally arrived again with this game, and unlike so many other Wii remakes over the years, it is just as beautiful as it once was, if not even more so. Or well, okay, the fact that the crates on this straightaway have been replaced with coins kinda sucks, and the final ramp is a bit puny now, but if you look at everything else, it's pretty much a perfect example of a course that stays true to the original. It's still a chaotic item factor with tons of conveyor belts and hydraulic presses to be wary about. And even in spite of being so faithful, it still manages to inject some more technical platforming into the layout too, particularly at the end with the girders you can now slide on. There's really not much else to say, it's still a legend of a track. However, it's not the best retro course in the game. That honor has to go to Shy Guy Bazaar, opening up the top 3. This one manages to hit all of the marks and almost even more. The Arabian Desert market aesthetic is already one of the most vibrant and stunning in all of gaming for me, and while I was initially worried that the change to daytime would remove some of the original charm, it honestly makes it even more beautiful and lively here, making it feel like a truly bustling market. And even then, you can still play it at night, so who cares? And the technicality is through the roof. You can not only grind on top of the tents in the plaza, but you can even enter the bazaar from the sidelines, by jumping toward the rope and then breezing past the rooftop alley. They didn't need to do any of this at all, but I'm so happy they did. Even the straightaway at the end, which I thought was a little boring originally, has been made more engaging. If only they went even further though. See, this could have very well been my favorite track in the whole game. It was this close. Because there's actually also a second route through the track, where you drive through Daisy's palace. And while it's not as technical as the main variant, it's still super cool. Although unfortunately, it's not available by default. Only if you play it in versus mode and arrive from Airship Fortress or Wario Stadium. And that's really sad. It would have really helped to make this course even more engaging as a second lap. And because of the way it also ends in you driving backwards through the bazaar, maybe it could have also been used as an excuse to have the final lap be the first one backwards. Oh well, maybe in a future update, if Nintendo would be so kind. In silver, we have the Great Question Block Ruins. There is only a total of one problem that this course has, and that's the name is really f***ing stupid. Good thing that doesn't matter when playing though. Because oh my, has this got to be one of the coolest set pieces ever for a course. I mean, you're racing through an abandoned sky temple, themed around these question mark blocks. It's shiny and exciting, and the layout has a ton of verticality and split roads. And technicality wise, it's probably at the very top in terms of complexity. The fact that it's not number 1 is only a testament to how goated the track selection is in this game. Even the music, while maybe a bit too whimsical, perfectly captures the feeling of touristing through the most magnificent ruins you've seen. It's just that the best course in the game is even better. And now, for my favorite track in the game, that has without a doubt got to be Dry Bones Burns. Holy f***, I did not have any expectations at all going into this. If I had to explain in layman terms what makes this course so mesmerizing, see it as this game's equivalent to Ninja Hideaway. I don't even like lava themes that much, but this track combines it with a vibrant Mexican-inspired aesthetic, making it so much more colorful and unique. Layout-wise, the whole track is pretty much always made up of a higher and lower level, allowing for each lap to feel distinct from one another, which already is a good start, but even within those levels, you have split paths as well, and oftentimes you can alternate between them. And they didn't cheap out on technicality either. There's still plenty of rail grinding and wall jumping sections too to be had. Oh yeah, and all of this is happening while you're driving on the massive skeleton remains of a huge dry bones. Honestly, this could very well be my new favorite track in the series. I'm not gonna celebrate just yet on that, but considering it has no problems and everything it does makes me happy, I wouldn't rule that out. Although honestly, the top 3 of this ranking are all equally flawless to me. And even the music, to a lesser extent, sounds like it's inspired by Megalovania from Undertale at times. Although for some reason, no one else seems to agree with me. I don't know, give it a listen, I assure you I'm not hallucinating. Without a doubt, there was no way that this track wouldn't be number 1. And so there you have it, that is my full ranking of all 30 to 31 courses in Mario Kart World. And holy cow, am I burnt out after all of this. This has got to be the most ambitious video I've made in a long time, and hopefully you all enjoyed watching this ranking unfold. I know a lot of you in the comments are gonna say that it's too early to make this video, but honestly, I've played through these tracks above and beyond, so I think it was fair for me to make this video. But what is your favorite track in Mario Kart World? Did you agree with me or not? Let me know in the comment section down below what your ranking is, and if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, as I make even more Mario Kart videos. And follow me on my Discord server, Greenpipe City, as well as on Twitter and Patreon for more updates, and I'll see you all soon. Until next time.